you guys. Let's get started. Thanks so much for coming. On behalf of the faculty, captain here, welcome to Pikesville Volunteer Fire Company. Training space up strong. Very long time. Anesthesia and adult ICU physician at Pikesville Volunteer at Pikesville, and I have the honor of serving in the medical director's office. In Baltimore County. So certainly on behalf of Pikesville, on behalf of the medical director's office, on behalf of the EMS office, Director Shedding, Captain Willett, and Director Stewart, Captain Stewart, thanks for your dedication to lifelong learning. Tonight we have Rick Yaffe. Rick is a managing member of Butler Medical Transport. He's also a member of Chestnut Volunteer Fire Company, Pikesville Volunteer Fire Company, and as we know, he's exceedingly active in the Pikesville community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Being so generous with your time. Appreciate it.
Is there a certain place I have to stand?
Nope, we'll follow you.
All right, because I don't stand in one place too long. Thank you all for coming. Usually there's three types of people that show up for these kind of things. The person that wants to be here, the person that doesn't want to be here but feels like it's vacation, and of course then the prisoner. And those are usually the ones that are going for continuing ed. So is this continuing ed? Yeah. All right, so we might have some prisoners here. And if you're a prisoner, it's okay. We want to talk about customer service in EMS and what it means. And my discussions are usually interactive. So I love input. What is customer service? What is customer service to you? Brian, if I can call on you first.
Sure. Light, showing that you care. This most complaints come from customers for lack of customer service than actual performing your duties.
All right, so that would be called good customer service. What's bad customer service?
Bad customer service would be like fellas, we're always here, things like that.
All right, so tonight I want to talk about good customer service. How do we provide good customer service? What does it mean? And how does it affect you and the organization that you represent? And what role do you play in the EMS world? When you look at, we'll take Baltimore County to start off. Baltimore County is very dynamic and it has career volunteer. What role do you play? Are you a little cog in a big wheel, or are you a big cog in a little wheel, or are you a big cog in a big wheel? What are you? What's your role? How do you perceive yourself? And how do you align your goals with the organization that you represent? So,
we're the first contact to the medical system that's going to take care of these things. So the way our first foot through the door got to be courteous, concerned about patient's welfare, and take it from there, all the way through the transport.
you're absolutely correct. So we'll jump around. Where does the call begin? When does the call begin? When you get to the person's house? Before it's dispatched. So as soon as you get into your vehicle, what is it that we want to make sure? What's going to be important? Do you have your equipment? Have you been known ever to go out on a call and you've pencil whipped it, you've checked everything, and you get to the call and you don't have a stretcher? Has that ever happened? I know it's happened. Have you ever gotten to the call and all of a sudden the pulse ox doesn't work, or the batteries are dead in your life pack? Do we check our equipment? How do we look? Do we look the part? Do we look like we look professional, just like you were talking about, Joe? Do you look the part? Who are you? Are you frazzled when you go in? Do you look like anybody here? Are you ready for the call? So one of the things that we always talk about when I'm talking about customer service is, what's it really about? What are your values, and does it align with your organization? And every day you have a choice of, there's only one thing you never get to choose. Anybody know what that is? One choice you never have in life. See you all. What's the one choice, Richard? I'm putting you on the spot.
One choice that
you do not have in life?
Which one's coming in next?
No. Being born. You had absolutely no say in it. But every day you have a choice of how you want to come to work, how you want to perceive yourself, how you want to be perceived. So how do your values align with the organizations you represent? I think that's probably a great place to start. If your officers don't care, and your bosses don't care, and your partners don't care, does it take something out of it for you when you go out on a call? Do you want to come back and say, hey, we had a great time, we did a wonderful job, they really liked us? How do you tell if you did a good job or not? Expectations. Have you met the expectations that you have been given, if you've even been given expectations? One of the things that we see quite often in customer service is people don't know what the expectations are. They've never been a clear, defined role as to what we expect from you. So we all rely sometimes on common sense. And Joe, you have new people come in all the time, and I know you do a lot of instructing with skiing also, and you're very good at the customer service end. How do you explain to your people your expectations as a leader?
Very interesting question. But generally, we have an offhand conversation with some of our new recruits. Tell them what we're going to run into. Tell them what's expected in the various situations. And follow up after the call with, did they meet the goals, treating the patient, doing the assessment, passing the information on, and being courteous and thoughtful, regardless of what the patient's attitude is. That all happens after every call. They are not evaluated, but they're counseling as to what could have been done better and what was outstanding.
So if you look at it, and we've now given people expectations, you now have metrics to be able to measure, have they met those expectations? So are there expectations? To me, what might be common sense is, if you get up in the middle of the night, do you go in with your turnout gear half on, pants hanging down, baseball cap turned backwards? What is the perception? That you have a clue what you're doing, that you just got out of bed, what's the perception you think you give? What's the perception? Look, every one of us in this room knows that you can walk into the room and you can have an 18-year-old paramedic or 18-year-old paramedic, and you have somebody like me that's a 45-year-old EMT, maybe a little older. And who do they look at? They look at the oldest person because they think that's the one that's most likely to be the one that's going to take care of what you're doing. Well, I happen to have a few, and there would probably be a few people that argue with me about, in academia, about how important paramedics are. To me, an EMT or somebody who has a lot of compassion and can talk to a patient and can smile and empathize with them far exceeds a paramedic that has great skills but doesn't know how to talk to a patient. And who is the patient? Who's your customer? Who is your customer when you go out on a call? The patient? Patient's family? Your boss? The police that show up? The neighbors? You're on stage. You are in the theater anytime you go out. And what's so exciting about that is you now get to be the one that everybody looks to. All of a sudden, supervisor shows up on a call. You show up on a call. All of a sudden, everybody sort of like move away and let you come in, or are they all sort of like try to keep you away? What goes on? What's your experience?
On the group. It depends on how freaked out they are when they want me to get right there and they'll just talk to me.
All right. So you bring up a wonderful point. They get freaked out. So when somebody's freaked out, do you think that correlates and transcends to everybody that's watching? So if all of a sudden it's like you tell your partner, can you grab the O2, and they say, what's that? That's bad, and I'm making it a little bit bigger than, or worse than it really is. Can you grab the endotracheal tube? And they have no clue what it is. What's the perception that takes place? What is the perception? The perception is this person doesn't know what they're doing. I'm a little skeptical. It gets down to the same point, and this is where I would disagree with people. How about customer service? And it's not good customer service. You arrive on the scene of a baby that you know has passed away. There are many people in the world that will say, you need to tell the family that the baby's dead and you can't do anything. I think that is the worst thing that can ever be taught. So from academia, they would say that's what we're supposed to do. I want that family to know that as a paramedic or an EMT, that I did everything I possibly could do to try to save that child. Even though I know that child's not going to make it. Because what does it do for you, your organization, and EMS as a whole? What's it do? Jeff?
Shows that you're doing everything you can and gives them closure.
Well, let's put it the other way. If you do nothing, and God forbid it was your child, what would you think?
You got all these guys here and this expectation up here and
So, you know, it's funny. I started in this business as a volunteer at Pikesville, I don't even know how many years ago. And I had my office across the street, 79 steps away, and tried to run every call I possibly could. I think I did one year, it was a little over 300 calls. And if I was talking to somebody, I'd leave them in my office and I'd come run a call, and loved it. I was here at this station for 9/11. Watching TV with some of the we were younger guys back then, but everybody remembers where they were. Some of us older ones will even remember where we were when John F. Kennedy got shot, or the spaceship that blew up. And there's certain things that people remember, and it's perception. We now have this wonderful ability of having telephones that have cameras. So what does everybody do, especially rescues? What's coming out first? There comes the camera, and you're on the scene. So if you show up, you look bad, you have no clue what you're doing, you've made your organization look bad. So the question becomes, what do we have to do to look good? If you show up at the house, and somebody says, oh, thank you so much for coming. What are some caustic words you don't want to use? Thank you for coming. The answer is, doesn't work. Again? You got me out of bed for this? That's my job? Those are wrong things to say, and we need to start teaching people what you need to say. I call it it. You want to try to teach people it. It is an undefined term in my book, but it is the ability to be able to communicate with others in a professional manner where you're not perceived as being a bad person. And that's something that needs to be talked about a lot. How perceptive are you? Are you pretty perceptive? Do you know what's going on around you? I can remember one of my first calls with Sam Pierce. Sam Pierce was, I think, 3 in the eastern side of town. Is that still 3? And he wanted to go to bed at 11 o'clock, and I wanted to run calls all night long. So I wouldn't let him go to bed, and we had one call. It was 3 o'clock in the morning for a young couple, 18, that had passed out and was on the ground unconscious. Sent an engine crew that shows up, and of course I walk in. I'm really excited about trying to hit him with Narcan and do everything that I'm taught in class. And Sam grabs me by the back of the neck because I managed to put myself between the patient, but I put the patient between me and the door. And he said, that's the first thing you never do. You never want to have the patient in front of the door so you can't get out. So it was a wonderful learning experience. But, you know, I wasn't even concerned about it. I was more excited about trying to help this person. And what happens, here comes engine crew or truck crew from 15. They came in, they looked like they had just been awakened. They had been there numerous times for this young couple. They had no lights in the house. The light bulbs didn't work, so they used flashlight. And I guess he was EMT, might have been the truck driver, came in, knew the guy, and decided, I'm going to try the sternal rub first to wake the guy up. What does he do? He comes over and takes this guy's nipple and twists it 360 degrees. And I go, I was never taught that in class. And it was like, that was a shock to me. The guy woke up really quick. He knew that this guy was there looking solely for drugs. And me being from this side of town, this took place in a different part of town, was not used to seeing that. And one of the things that I learned, drugs crosses all socioeconomic paths in life. And when I started riding at Pikesville, I experienced that, and that was a shock to me. And I still realize, though, that every person, whether it was Dundalk, Essex, Halethorpe, wherever, all were human beings and need to be treated the same. And one of the reasons that I got into the private ambulance world was because of this wonderful institution as Pikesville Volunteer. So my company started out of Pikesville, and it was really to be able to offer people good service and being polite. And I would call my friends up, and if I got a call and say, hey, can you help me run a call? And I didn't care if I got paid or not. It was the idea that I was helping somebody. I think everybody that's EMS gets some satisfaction out of knowing that they've helped somebody at a bad time. The biggest question that I get asked, and has nothing to do with EMS, is why do firefighters break every window before they go into a house? Anybody ever been asked that question? You ever get asked that question? What's a good answer? Because they're not EMTs? What's the right answer? To me, I will always say, we're always concerned about safety, and we want to make sure that everybody is out of the house. Windows can be replaced. It's a horrible answer, but I didn't want to say, as because you're taught in school, really try the door before you do anything, but I'm not going to say that. What benefit do we gain by saying something along those lines? So we need to make each other feel somewhat special. So how are you? Are you perceptive? Are you an introvert? This is an interesting study. Anybody in here an introvert? All right. Then you're going to do well on the test. Anybody an extrovert? Joe, raise your hand. Richard, come on now. Or are you both? All right, you're both. All right. So let me see if I can figure out how to do this. Is there a secret to this? Is bad. Yeah, how do I click this link one? Nothing's moving. Oh, there we go, up here, okay. Now, if you've seen this before.
This is a test of selective attention.
Can you make it bigger?
Count how many times.
Yeah, but really pay attention.
Pass the basketball.
I was trying to get to a full screen, but
I'm trying.
thank you. So who's perceptive in here?
This is a test of selective.
Who's perceptive? All of you, right? Okay.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
How many?
Passes did you count?
Okay, listen.
The correct answer is 15.
Congratulations. Here's the best part, though.
But did you see the gorilla?
Did you see the gorilla? There was a gorilla. My point to this whole thing is that no matter what you think you see, it isn't always what you see. And sometimes you go in so focused, you missed the gorilla, right? Did you miss the gorilla? All right, did you miss the gorilla? You've seen it before then. Okay. So what they found from this is that 50% of the people that took this test at Harvard did not see the gorilla. And they find most of the time it's usually the extroverts that miss it. Have you seen it before? So it's much more exciting when it's the first time. And anybody that, like, the first time I saw it and missed it, I was like very upset. Yes?
There's another version of that now, that the color of the shirts change. So you're watching, right? And many of us have seen the gorilla, but now we don't see literally all the colors change. And you have no idea. You don't even see it.
Well, there are a whole lot of those out there, and the idea was about perception. When you get to a call, when you first pull up, are you watching to see what's around? Are you sure the scenes are safe? The world has changed in the last 25 years in EMS. Have we gotten to the point yet where we're starting to wear safety protection when we're out? We're wearing it out on the street now for accidents, correct? Vests, the color vests or anything? Are we wearing vests yet? How about going into bad neighborhoods or rough areas? Are we wearing any kind of protection? Are we wearing backpacks that are bulletproof yet? I was out at the Consumer Electronics Show in January, and that was a big deal. One of the cool things that they're doing is they're having backpacks that are bulletproof, but on the back it's digitized, so you can put any kind of advertisement you want. So if you wanted to advertise for Baltimore County Fire Department, you could actually have Baltimore County going across so that people know who's there. And it leads me to the discussion, and why I bring this up, is when you get on a call and you represent your organization, does your customer, your client, your patient know who you're with? How do they distinguish you from everybody else? So Baltimore, here's one that I am sure happens regularly. It happened all the time when I was doing it. Be the first one on the scene, get vitals, get history, you get signs and symptoms, everything that we're taught to get. And what happens, here comes somebody else that's a paramedic or somebody that's now going to take care of the patient, walks right by you and goes to the patient and says, "What's wrong?" Is that right? Even if you don't care, you should at least acknowledge and say thank you and do what you want to do. As the class continues to get smaller and smaller, so it becomes a real dilemma. How do we teach people how to be courteous and how to treat others with respect? Because ultimately, if Pikesville goes out, or Chestnut Ridge goes out, or Glendon goes out, or any volunteer goes out, and a career station shows up and doesn't act professional, what's it make the volunteer look like? And vice versa. What if it's a career as a crew that's there and a volunteer shows up and the volunteer is not looking professional, is coming in dressed with jeans and a t-shirt and a hat on backwards and looks sloppy and smells bad, and we'll talk about hygiene. What do? How do you turn a bad situation into a positive scenario? Well, I have to turn to the people that have all the experience in this. Chief?
Sometimes the role modeling hopefully would help. They see the people around them, so hopefully people try to be like role models that are around them, and that should be our lieutenants, the more experienced people in there's informal leaders in every station, and a lot of times they're the ones that set the tone. So, it's not always just an officer or somebody up headquarters or a captain and above that's setting that stuff. A lot of times the culture's ruined by the informal leaders that are in the station, and what they really establish what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And then sometimes as that goes farther, if that's not going to be enough to fix that, and then it's, years just say, hey, this is what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. But then sometimes it just comes into eventually you have to have a difficult conversations.
So,
Sorry, no one.
I'm glad this is popular. Well, I might as well just pull it. Joe, you might as well just pull up a seat here, and we'll all just have a round table. And that's a problem. And how do you address it? How do you get, if the Baltimore County Fire Department is doing an incredible job and has taught everybody what I'll call it, and they've got it, and you're dealing with some volunteer companies that don't, does that make everybody look bad? It makes everybody look bad. They don't know the difference. And that's a double-edged sword. Can be good, can be bad. So how do we turn a bad scenario into a positive scenario? And this is where we usually do a little role-playing, but there aren't a whole lot of people to do role-playing. But we're going to try. Jeff, what's your favorite restaurant?
Favorite restaurant? G&M.
G&M. Are they, okay. They have great crab cakes, right? Have you ever had a bad experience there?
Not yet.
All right. Give me a restaurant where you've had a bad experience.
It's now called the Barrel House in Austin. It was the actual before. I can't remember.
All right. Tell us about your bad experience.
It was Mother's Day. We went in, got seated in 15, 20 minutes, and then waited 45 minutes before anybody ever acknowledged we were at the table, and then we left.
So you got to a point where the light switch went off and you were done.
Right.
There's nothing that could have been done to fix it at that point.
Yes.
So let's assume now that, did you make it known that you had been waiting to anybody?
We did talk to, we grabbed the waiter down by and said that we didn't hear so.
All right, so what could have happened that could have turned that negative experience into a positive experience? If the owner would have come over and said, I really apologize, let me get you an appetizer.
I think if somebody would have acknowledged, say, we made a mistake,
Bingo, it's the acknowledgement. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging when you've made a mistake. You can't argue with somebody when they say, I made a mistake. You know, if you try to defend yourself, what ends up happening? You end up digging deeper, and what happens in the county when people try to save themselves? They get somebody else to lie for them, and next thing you know, it's even out of control. Never happened, I'm sure. It's how do you let people have that intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence enough to be able to say, we made a mistake and we're sorry. We screwed up. And if they would have come over and said to you, we screwed up. We saw you were here, totally forgot. We made a mistake. What can we do for you? Can I get you a drink? Can I buy you dinner? Would that have changed your attitude a little bit? Of course. All right, so let's take that now to EMS. Sean, this is where I need your help.
Yeah.
I would like you to be a person that comes in and tries to smooth out a situation, because Richard and Joe were just playing tennis, and Richard passed out, and Joe doesn't speak English really well. And Jeff is a newspaper reporter that just happens to be having his camera out watching all this go on, while Joe is trying to explain to Jeff in French what's going on. All right, try it. Now, Richard, you got to make pretend you're out.
Oh, he's got the easy one.
All right, Joe, tell him what's wrong. In French. Make up words.
I can't do that.
Okay, so let's bring it to another part. Cultural differences. What happens with cultural differences? What sources do we have? Are we taught?
We're afraid to fall asleep.
Look, don't breathe. Don't breathe.
What's going on? What's happening? What's going on?
Don't breathe. Don't breathe.
Thank you.
Don't breathe.
Thanks. Hey, are you okay?
All right, so now what's happened? Now you've got it on film. They look like they have no idea what they're doing, and it just made the paper that we had Baltimore County trying to save a guy that they had no clue what they were doing, even though you guys did a wonderful job. So my point to the whole conversation about this is, how do you take a negative and turn it into a positive? What could we have done differently? Not played tennis, obviously, but What could we have done differently? Called for somebody that maybe speaks French. At least maybe try to get the patient away from the public so they can't see what's going on. I had a wonderful opportunity, and this is a little political, but don't take it too politically. The band Alabama was playing at an RNC engagement, probably 2 years ago, before our president was elected, was placed in office. Whether you like or dislike, it is not important for the story. So one of the requirements that Alabama had, the band, the leader is sick, is they have to have a private ambulance service there, a paramedic and an EMT, there during this whole presentation. 700 people. So I decided I was going to go. I wanted to see what it was like, to see how important people live. 17 billionaires that were there out of 700 people. And did not know it. Secret Service, FBI, Homeland Security. I mean, it was absolutely incredible. And the only thing they didn't do was they never checked us. We were walking around like never checked. And I'm going, this is really bizarre. So we're backstage with Alabama, and somebody's giving a speech. Next thing we hear, 700 people, I don't remember where it was being held, a really nice place. Is there a doctor in the house? So of course I come running out, and my partner comes running out, and this lady has passed out, and she's now laying on the floor. Well, of course, everybody, you have ambassadors from all over the world. We're now on stage, in the sense everybody is watching what we're going to do. What do you do? Do you start CPR in front of everybody? Now let me give you a little background, because I didn't know who the lady was at the time. But her husband was in charge of the Port Authority at one point, and I believe now is an ambassador. And my first impression was, is she breathing? If she was, let's get her out of here so she's not going to be embarrassed by everybody else. And we took her to a different room, where we were able then to find out that she had been not feeling well. Long story short, we became everybody's best friend. We could walk anywhere in that building and nobody stopped us. Because of what I believe was great customer service for this lady, we made a great impression on everybody that was there. We looked professional, we acted professional, we were telling the FBI what to do. It was like, we need to get her out of here, into another room, need a chair, and we weren't meek about it. And I can be loud. So I was giving out orders, and the FBI was doing a great job listening. And we got the patient to another room, and fortunately she was good. I think it was more flu symptoms, but it was an interesting experience. At that point, it was like we could walk through the ballroom with 700 famous people, and I felt like I belonged. So I didn't belong necessarily politically, I belonged because I was there as the paramedic. But it's all about the customer service. I got thanked by everybody that was there. I enjoyed the experience. So turning a bad scenario into a positive scene. And I always like to bring up restaurants because it's really easy. Anybody ever been to a Taco Bell? Anybody like Taco Bell other than me and Richard? Okay. What is it? We're losing the service industry, if everybody notices. Now we have kiosks that you can order your meals at McDonald's. We're losing that service ability. And why is that? Why do you think that is? Money. They say now it takes 5 years for you to develop a new friend. And that right now there was a push, I think it was even today, and we see it in the elderly community, where there's loneliness and depression. Big deal. And what are they doing about it? I think today there was something special that was done where the counties got together and tried to serve meals. Is that what it was? Eat with an elder, which was wonderful. But what is the fire department as a group doing to engage the public to let them know that we care? What are we doing? We show up when we get called. We do public service. I know Pikesville does. Does everybody else do it? Does the county do it? It's great. We look at the city. I was at I guess a soiree with the mayor Tuesday night with about 80 other people, and he was talking about the city and how he wants to improve the city and bring people in. Obviously, safety is a big factor, and I'm sitting there going, you know what? How do you make it better? You got to get out there and see people. And I happen to like Jack Young, but he was really quiet when he was speaking. What impression do you think that gave most of the people in the crowd when he's almost whispering, and you've got people that are my age and older that are sitting further away and can't hear him? Do you want somebody that is loud and bold and has vision, or do you want somebody that sort of just tells you all the problems with no ideas? So what is it that we can do in Baltimore County as a group? And this goes right to the EMS department. How do you engage everyone in the volunteers and career to become engaged for something, to let them know that not only we're here to protect you and help you and save you, but we go above and beyond. It's always a wonderful story when you see the fire department that just gave oxygen to a cat or a dog. It'll make the paper every time. Or the firefighter that saw a person sitting at a table in a restaurant by themselves and went over and offered to say hello. Do we do that? What do we do to get out there and make us look good? Well, let me give you an example. Do we end up taking, we'll use Medic 320, who's B, is that me? Medic 325 goes out on a call, and they happen to be running in the Dundalk area because everybody's busy. And they see a bar called Squires. Is Squires a bar or a restaurant? All right, what's a bar down there? All right, they decide, you know what, we're going to stop in at this bar and grab something to eat. So we've got a medic parked outside of this bar. Two guys walk in wearing Baltimore County shirts. What's the perception? Great, we've got two EMTs or paramedics going in to drink. Is that the perception? What do you think people think? Take the example of two ambulances. Medic 2 and Medic 325 pull up on Reisterstown Road, and they pull up next to each other. And they're now have their windows down and they're talking. All of a sudden the light turns green. What do you think everybody's thinking? The two are racing? They're not letting anybody get by? They're staying the same speed? It's a perception. Should we be ever having two ambulances next to each other where it impedes traffic? Joe, you have that look.
It needs more information to fill the opinion. Are they racing? Are they keeping up with speed? Do they move away from the traffic light when the turns, or are they stop dead pulling the traffic up? Yeah. So therefore, we need a little more information.
Okay. You make up the scenario.
No, let's use your scenario.
Okay, my scenario. They both take off, and they both take off very quickly, and they're racing up Reisterstown Road, and they're trying to get to the speed limit. And now it's a shooting, and they've been called. So now they're going over the speed limit, and they're not using their lights or siren because they've been told not to. And I'm making this up a little bit worse. What do people think?
They have no idea what to think.
All right, I'm going to change the scenario now. Let's use police cars. You get two police cars that all of a sudden are sitting next to each other, and all of a sudden they take off, and they're now going someplace, and they're not using lights and sirens. What are you as Citizen Joe thinking? They're going on a call?
There's a bit of shooting.
I'm not thinking that.
I am.
Why can they do it and we can't?
Well, exactly. They're abuse of power again. They're driving as quickly as they want, and nobody's going to stop them. How many times have you gone into a bank, if they still have banks out there, and you see the bank teller? There's always one teller that's open and four that are closed, and they're all standing behind the counter. And you're saying, wait a minute, I'm standing in line for 5 minutes and nobody's helped me. What's the perception? Is the expectation that when you walk in, you should be taken care of? Or is the expectation is, I'm going to end up having to wait because there's 4 tellers there and they all look like they're just having a good old time? So it comes down to a lot of perception and expectations of what you think. So if we know that's what people are going to think, we should try to avoid not doing it. So we should never, it should be mandated, never 2 ambulances should be next to each other. 2 fire trucks shouldn't be driving. Police cars shouldn't be next to each other. They should be behind each other. Now, if two police cars are behind each other and they're now racing, does that give you a different impression? Would that give you a different impression? They're going to a call. If they're next to each other, they're racing. You know, I was fortunate, I think you might have been on that call when a police officer flipped his car on Slade Avenue and Reisterstown Road. And I remember trying to, when we were cutting the car up, seeing that large shotgun looking at me while the police officer's laying on his side. It was like, this is scary. But, you know, we have to be able to react in all kinds of scenarios because when you get down to it, every one of us is human. We're all going to have certain things that are going to frighten us, but we can't let the public know. I had a EMT that worked for me recently, relatively new, that the first time they saw blood, they threw up. That's not a real good thing in this business. So obviously, I'm not sure how to teach that, but it didn't look good to the nursing home that they were in, that they not only had a patient that needed to go to the hospital, but they had an EMT that they had to clean the vomit up from. So let's talk about how your actions affect others in your organization. And I can look to you two because you've been officers here. And I'm sure that you've had to discipline or talk to others that have come through that sometimes think this is not serious, it's a game and they can do whatever they want. Is that fair to say? That you've had to have conversations with people? How has their actions affected what you do or your organization? You have an EMT or a paramedic that goes out that really doesn't want to be out, and they go out to a call for a car accident knowing that it's probably a non-realistic call and they just really want to get a refusal form. That never happens, I'm sure. And they go up and say, oh, you seem to be okay. Sign the refusal. And they sign the refusal, and what do you think the perception is? That person didn't care. And I will tell the story, and it happened to me. I was driving around with 2 career firefighters in the back of a car on Smith Avenue, and this guy plowed into the back of us. I was really excited because Pikesville showed up. And the paramedic got out, and who I did not know. I thought I would know everybody at the time. Did not know him. And he says, doesn't look like anybody's hurt. Does anybody want to go to the hospital? That was his first words. And I'm going, really? Is that what you're going to ask? And he says, here's a form you can sign. So we all signed it, and I'm going, you know, my shoulder hurts a little bit, but you know, I'm not going to be the one that whines and cries about it. But I was really disheartened that my own company at the time, and this was many years ago, took that approach. And that was the day that I really decided how important customer service was and how we treat people. And if we can treat people the way we expect to be and exceed their expectations, you've done a great job for your organization. And I know you get lots of compliments. Pikesville gets lots of compliments from the people that you take care of. Fair to say? And that goes to leadership. Does Baltimore County get a lot of them? And that goes to leadership. The question is, how do we improve upon it to new people coming in, because the world now is a different place than it was 10 years ago, where we all interacted in this room by being able to talk to people. Now you see people that will walk into glass walls because they're playing on their phones, or they manage to trip off the sidewalk because they're not paying attention where they're going. How does it affect the organization? How many times do you get a call from what's the Chief Rund? How often does Chief Rund say, we have an issue that I need you to help me with? Ever?
So, no, not with her, yes.
All right, let's take my good friend Chief Homan. Hey Chief, I hope you're watching.
It happened a couple times.
And what would he do? He probably was not a happy camper that he got a phone call from a constituent or from a council person or from a patient.
And that's the thing, a lot of those calls, that's where they come in from now, either council person or their county executive's office, because very simply, somebody, on their phone, they can look up the number of the county executive, and you can file a complaint online now. So, before, you would have to go home, think about it, draft a letter, right? You had to be really mad to send something. Now you can do it in just a couple seconds, and it's there.
And then
It acted on every time it does.
And how much time does it take to have to investigate it and look through it?
Sometimes days, weeks.
It's a problem. So the question is, how do we all understand in all levels of EMS how important it is what we do and how it affects our organization? Do we teach that? Something we should think about. Do we tell every single recruit that comes through Pikesville how important their part is and how important the part they play in keeping our organization in a very high-profile limelight? Do we do it for Baltimore County?
We do it in orientation, but we could do better.
All right, so that's something that's wonderful. It's how do we do it, and how do we accomplish it, and most importantly, how do we measure it? And it's really measured, in my opinion, by the number of positive comments you get, not by the number of negative comments, but by the number of positive comments, because most people expect positive results. When I get a phone call, and I get phone calls all the time, and it's always like, uh-oh, I'm afraid to listen, and 90% of the phone calls I get are positive about a crew that I have that took care of a patient that went above and beyond. And I'll teach my crews. You take a patient, we do more of taking patients home than we do taking patients to a hospital in the private world. And it's, what are you going to do when you get home? Do we take, if you see the trash can down at the end of the driveway or the newspaper, do we manage to maybe pick it up and bring it up to them? Do we ask them if they need us to put water down for their dog? Do we make sure they have all their lights on and the doors are locked if they're single, living by themselves? There's nothing worse that you get a patient, and we're seeing it more and more. I was once on Frederick County called us once because they couldn't figure it out how to move a 600-pound patient. So there's nothing worse when you go to a repeat customer and it's a heavy or obese person and we treat them with anything less than dignity. Whether it's snide comments that are made that they might not hear. You know what? They're not deaf. They still hear. Just because they're heavy set doesn't mean they can't hear. What are we doing to make sure that that patient's covered, that we're going through everything we could possibly to make them feel comfortable? Do we teach that? Do we call it LBS patient? What do we call it? Bariatric patient these days? What's Baltimore County do? You call an engine crew and you have 15 people show up. How does that look to the community when you see a patient that's got 2 fire trucks, an engine, 2 ambulances outside, and they're bringing out a heavy-set patient? What's the perception? It's like, holy cow, they need all these resources to get this patient out? We've had to cut people out where the doors are, and they take Frederick County tried to take this patient out through a window with a crane. Where's the dignity in that? That's not how we have to operate.
And that's what causes us to go to bariatric units, and we're getting 3 more that are in the next year. Years ago, there was an incident on the east side where they actually took the guy to the hospital on a state body truck in the back of it, laying him down.
Oh, that's horrible.
Kind of what led to the fact that we're not going to continue to do that.
So the good news is that we learned something from it, and while it might have happened once, we hope we never repeat it.
Greg, can you just share some of the stories that people are sharing? Folks online are saying they can't hear it.
I'm sorry?
Just some of the stories or things that people are sharing with you. people online can't.
Yeah, so the story was on the east side, they had a patient that was heavy and they ended up having to transport the patient by stake body truck. And we learned something from it, which was a good thing, was now we know that we can address it and still give this patient some dignity and some privacy.
Even the hospitals can't handle it. I mean, we got a call a few years back that a squad or whatever was off Captain Krebs at the time in Station 1, hit a patient in the ER off the floor and back into bed. And they used airbags.
Well, and again, we sometimes will do things that, look, hospitals by far are not accustomed to doing some of the things that you in the field do every day. By far. How many times you can probably get to the hospital and they'll ask you for help? Look, I can remember when I did my first clinicals at Trauma Center. I loved it, except that it was around July 1st, and I didn't know what happens on July 1st when all the new docs come in. And I'm walking around like I know what I'm doing. We just brought a patient in, and a doctor comes up to me and says, "What do I do?" Wasn't a really good feeling. He'd have been better off not saying anything and making pretend that he knew what he was doing instead of asking me. Because the perception became this is not typically what shock trauma does. So it all comes down to how we're going to be perceived. What do you think? Crew look like the professional? Is that the way we look every time we go out? That's the way Larry looks every time he goes out.
Most of the time, whenever I do that, I look like that.
That's exactly right. So the importance of appearance, importance of hygiene. Even if you hate your partner, do you need to make it shown that you hate your partner? Does it happen? Snide remarks, comments made? Rick, I know you've been doing this a long time. Has there ever been partners that didn't get along? And how's it usually, where's it, does it transcend to the field when they're out on the call?
I've never had that experience.
All right.
I'm more professional than that.
Because you'd probably make sure it never happened. But I can promise you it's happened. I've seen it. And it's still going to happen. So how do you fix it? Joe?
If it gets up to the officer level, which it should not, that's when you have all concerned in the same room, talking about what happened, what is the result of what could result, not only in the relationship between the providers, but the runoff that patient sees, the patient's family sees.
Everybody sees it, right? And it affects your organization.
So you clearly describe it, and also without being rude or nasty, say, this can't happen. If it happens again, we get a report that you've been discourteous to a patient's family. You're not going to be writing because you are bringing our reputation down, and the patient, whether you have to give him good care or not, perceives that they've got poor care.
So how many people does Pikesville have? How many actives do you have? What's the active number? How many? All right. What's Baltimore County?
We're at 1,000.
1,000. So you have a bigger problem, and then we can talk about that. Cultural differences.
Harder for them to do divide and operate than it is for us.
Right. Absolutely. That's why I wanted to ask you first. So you get to cultural differences. We once had to take a patient to China. Took a gentleman to China by way of airlines, and you're not allowed to, as we found out. A hospital was paying a lot of money to keep this person in the hospital. So much so that it was cheaper for them to pay a lot of money to fly this person back to China. Hired us to take this patient with an EMT. So we had this young lady that was very willing to go to China and accompany this guy who didn't speak any English. Lo and behold, they got to the airport. If you're going to stay in China or go to China, you need a visa. Well, we didn't have a visa for this young lady, so we had to put the guy up in a hotel. Well, we put him up in the hotel. She's not allowed, because of the cultural difference, to stay with him. So then we had to bring in a male EMT to stay with him. And then find out that the only way to get to China is you've got to book a flight Thailand, where China is a stopover, and that's the only way to get there, and then you just cancel the other part of the trip. Where you run into a problem is when the plane is delayed and the plane that's supposed to be going to Thailand already leaves, and you're now stuck in China. So we managed to get this guy there, but the cultural difference made it really difficult to be able to take and through the logistics. And again, we did it internally, but to somebody that wouldn't have known, if my paramedics or EMTs would have been, complaining or whatever, it would have looked bad for everybody. The airlines were wonderful to work with, I must say. You get it, I think I spelled that wrong. I did spell it wrong. I caught it. I was the first one to notice it, so I get credit.
Apparently he didn't catch it soon enough.
Must have hit too many L's. So also we have that problem. I guess we have a large Muslim community over on the Johnny Cake Road area. We have the large Jewish population in the Pikesville area. Do we know how to treat the different cultures the way we're supposed to? Is that taught? Is that taught in Baltimore County? What's that? Okay, how about on the other side of town? Or you get a very religious Jewish person and a person that doesn't know anything about Judaism, and it's a female patient and a male provider. What do we do? Do we ask for a female to show up? What do we do? Do we know about it? Are we taught? And it's not necessarily cultural differences. Sometimes there's even protocol differences, which all perception. I had a lady that was in a car accident on, Green Spring Valley, Green Spring Avenue, somewhere around there. Flipped her car. I was a paramedic, put her in the medic. And what are we supposed to do? When somebody's been in a car accident, what are we supposed to do? Spine, do the whole check, right? Supposed to cut clothes off, check to make sure there's no bleeding. She was a little bit younger than me at the time. I'm in the back of the ambulance. She says, I got to tell you, I'm not wearing underwear. Now what are you going to do? You still going to cut the clothes off? It's all about the perception. Do you need them to say, you cut my clothes off just because you wanted, especially in the Me Too movement now? What are you going to do? Richard, what will you do? All right. Are there people in the fire department that would literally take and say, I'm supposed to cut the clothes off, so that's what I'm going to do?
But there are.
But there are, and that's the problem. And that, to me, is that considered an exceptional call? If you're supposed to do something but you don't do it, is that malfeasance or nonfeasance? But I like your idea. It's focused exam. Jeff, what do you think?
I agree with you.
Look, I did not do it. It was, what are we first taught? Protect yourselves. I did not need anybody making an accusation that I cut the clothes off just because I was supposed to, no matter what they might have perceived. The patient seemed very stable, was loose, didn't have any pain, no back pain. I went through the whole cranial nerves, I did the whole bit. But I felt comfortable enough that I was making the right decision for not only the patient, but for myself. So we've talked about this, caustic words. What are some caustic words? You have to go to the hospital? Why did you call us? What's that? We'll take you if you want to go. There's nothing wrong with you. Sign this refusal. Rick, you've heard them all. What are some other ones?
Part we have to take you is because that's what we're hearing. Because certain documents everybody go to the ER. You shouldn't clear anybody to the field or accept the refusal. If we're handcuffing the stretcher, we're not forcing you to get it.
Well, and how many times have we had the patient that has the suitcase by the door, ready to go to the hospital? Anybody here had that experience other than me? And what do? And I must say that everybody I've ever worked with at Pikesville, when I would ride 911 or Chestnut Ridge, was always professional And while we might have talked about it after the fact, there was nothing ever said in front of the patient. I've heard horror stories from the west side, or I guess it's the east side, where they'll have arguments with the patient about going to a hospital. And that's not acceptable because it affects all of us. We were talking about earlier words you don't want to say to patients. Patient says thank you. What is a word? What is something you should not say? Larry? It's my job. That's a wrong answer. Is a wrong answer. What can we say? Because again, we're trying to make this positive experience that we want the expectations to be much greater than what these people ever thought. How do we do it? What are some words we could say? What's that?
I appreciate you telling me that.
That works?
What was that?
I appreciate you telling me that. You're welcome. Is there anything else I can do for you? Are you comfortable? Where do we sit when we ride in a call? Do we sit in the captain's chair so the person has no clue you're even in the unit? There was a paramedic that did an incredible job every time that worked for Baltimore County that has always impressed me. His name was Gary Raines. He would always kneel by the patient. Would always talk to the patient, would always comfort the patient. I am sure that anybody that's ever ridden, how many times have you been propositioned to either stay with the patient, stay at the hospital with them, or want them to keep you company? Ever happen? And why is that? Why is that? Comfort level. You have made that patient comfortable that they appreciate what you've done, they appreciate how you've taken care of, and they bonded with you in that sense. And you are seeing them at their nadir. You're seeing them at their worst time. And you now are their closest person that they want to talk to, that they want to stay, especially in the elderly community. Happens all the time. So overall, good customer service in EMS. What do we need to do? Education, education, education. And we need to come up with metrics, and we need to come up with ways to make sure we tell people what the expectations are of your organization. Are the expectations every time you go out on a call that you're going to look professional, or you're going to be wearing shorts, or you're going to be wearing a t-shirt with a baseball cap? Is it going to have the name of the company on it? Are we going to end up showing up in a medic that doesn't have the equipment, the stretcher's missing, or the O2 is out? I'm sure that's never happened, right? Never got on a call and the O2 wasn't there, or the pads don't work? Unfortunately, I've seen that happen recently. What would you say? What have you seen? Give me some examples. Brian, you've been around a long time. And I know what happens because I see some of the emails that come out. What are some things that you see?
30 minutes, not average.
Of course. Stretchers not made. Things missing off the ambulance that should be there? Okay. But it looks really bad if you show up and you need an AED and the AED wasn't checked and you go to turn it on and nothing happens. So it's about checking equipment. And this is where we talked about where does the call start? Well before you get the call. What obstacles are you going to encounter? What are some obstacles that we encounter every day? Traffic, not enough people in this field. That's a problem. Absolutely. Well, difficult patients are something that we can take a negative, hopefully, and turn into a positive. That's a wonderful thing when you can do that. There are a lot of grumpy people out there, a lot of people under a lot of stress, a lot of people that need help. What other obstacles do we encounter? From where? From the community. How about from officers? How about from leadership? Not necessarily in this organization, But I hear about Bonaire. Anybody heard of Bonaire up in Pennsylvania? What happened to Bonaire? It was recently in the news. They had somebody that supposedly was a white supremacist that was in the group as a volunteer. Did anybody hear the story? And what did the president and the officer said, you know what, we know this guy is a very good provider, and I probably don't have the story 100%, but it came down to, you know what the city decided to do, or the borough or whatever it was called, shut him down. Because of the perception of what the county or that area was doing. What's that? Absolutely. And if that's any one thing that I can express upon everyone in the EMS world is you are in the theater every time you are being seen. And it's how you react and what you do transcends to your company and what goes on. So at the end of the call, did you provide GCS? Now, this is the quiz question. What does GCS stand for? I was hoping you would say that. For those in the back, it's good customer service. So at the end of the day, what's the metrics? We got a letter that said, thank you very much, we got a donation. I am sure every volunteer fire company gets a donation after every patient they take. And I am sure the county gets numerous dollars from patients that they've transported.
Only we sold it, John.
Well, why aren't we?
Because the county financials money in a different direction.
Okay. How do we...
That's on both sides. I mean, career don't see it, volunteers don't see it. See some, they don't see what they should.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be money. Birthday, and I know it happens. Food, we get food, food ever show up here, ever show up at a station? People want to come in and thank you for saving their life. Happens all the time. That's a wonderful thing. Do we promote it and make sure that it's seen in the public? We don't do a very good job with that. Why? Why are we not promoting when somebody comes in and wants to thank you publicly for what your crew did? Why would we not be making sure that that's a big deal?
Like, what kind of ideas do you have, Rick, for making that a big deal?
First of all, the most important one, I think, is recognizing the crew or the people that were involved. Whether it's a citation, whether it's a gift card to McDonald's, some sort of recognition that you've done something well. Whether it's getting a phone call from the chief, whether it's a phone call getting somebody from the EMS office, whether it's a phone call getting from the chief at a volunteer firehouse or the president or whatever. It's about maybe taking pictures, and there is I have to give Mike Schwartzberg a lot of credit. He probably gets more PR than anybody out there. Getting PR in the local papers for something that you've done well. Baltimore County's got a wonderful website. I've never seen anything on there that shows where somebody's come in. I haven't seen it. It might exist.
Twitter and Facebook.
Okay, so if you're not I don't follow Facebook too well. I haven't quite figured out how to use it yet. I'm the guy. But why isn't it that we're not promoting that you've got fantastic people in your organization? You know, it breeds better people when they see other people getting recognition. Let's face it, everybody in EMS, almost everybody in EMS, would love to be the hero. How do you become that hero? If you see other people get recognition, it's not my job mentality, it's what do I need to do to be that person? How do we do it? You know, there are a lot of people that look up to some of the older, I'll take Rick Holden back here, not to patronize him because he's 15 years older than me, but, and we did go to school together. But there were a lot of people that looked up to him because of his professionalism and the way he treated people, no matter what color, what religion, what sexuality. He treated everybody the same and had great respect in the fire department. And people looked up to that. What can we do at the end of the day to make sure we're promoting the people that do a great job? If you do a great job and you don't get recognized, what happens? Every day you get to choose how you come to work, right? So you can either be happy, you can sort of say, okay, it's my job and I just saved a couple people and nobody made a big deal about it. You know what? Everybody needs their ego stroked. Why are we not doing that more to promote and get these people involved? You hear about declining numbers in volunteer fire companies and they come up with all kinds of excuses. You know what the number one reason really is? Recognition. Recognition is our biggest problem. How do we recognize people for a job well done? How does Pikesville do it?
Usually at the company meetings, if we have a letter, thank you, you did a great job. The letter is read to the entire company, and the providers' names are obviously part of the report that the secretary gives.
Do you think we could do something different to make it better so that the community knows?
Well, we do. We have firefighter of the year, EMS provider of the year, they're recognized by the county document. Top responders get jobs.
And again, I'm not picking, I'm just for discussion.
Media, it ends up in our system.
Social media is a wonderful way. We're doing that at Pikesville. Is every volunteer fire company doing that? That's great. Is the county doing it? But you're using Twitter and not Facebook. But you also have a website, and Pikesville I know has a website, and I've seen, the point of the whole thing is we've got to promote what we do so that other people realize how great the service is of the people that provide service to the community. Personal hygiene. Anybody ever ride with somebody that absolutely does not have good hygiene? What do? Do you make pretend because you don't want to hurt their feelings? What do you say? You call them aside and embarrass them in front of everybody? Is it a cultural difference why they haven't taken a shower in 2 weeks? Or why they haven't brushed their teeth or combed their hair? What do we do in the county level?
Officer will probably have a conversation with them.
Is it a difficult conversation? So the question is, why is it a difficult conversation? If they know what the expectations are, if you've explained it to them, why does it then become a difficult conversation?
It's a sensitive topic. You don't know what and you don't know the reasons why. Is it an abrupt? Did this just run out? Could there be problems? The person that had problems at home, could there be an underlying reason for it? Or is it something that's been neglected by a supervisor or by people just being nice for a long period of time? It's a lot more information that you just need to go if it's an abrupt thing. There could be something very serious.
So let me give you the scenario. Person was divorced and just thrown out of his house for cheating on his significant other, and has now been living in his car. So the right way to attack it is, are there some problems? Do we have to come around and say, you really smell bad? What's the issue? No, it's not the best way. Are there some family issues? And I think that is very important because you know what? Maybe this person is embarrassed. Maybe this person doesn't even know it, and maybe this person has so many other things going on in their life that they don't know how to handle it. And I think that's where officers come involved, but it's not the approach. There are some officers I know that would just go up to them and say, you really smell bad, you need to take a shower. We know anybody like that? I know somebody like that.
We talk all the time about taking care of our own, and things like that. Depression is a very insidious symptom. And things like that very well could be pressure from
Absolutely.
consider all that stuff.
Absolutely. Look, we're in a really tough field, requires a lot of mental preparation, and we've got to look for these signs and symptoms of our own to try to help. But I can't, one of the problems I have is the person that likes to put on way too much cologne or perfume. That's a whole different issue. Have you ever had to ride with somebody that has so much perfume on, or a nurse that comes to work, and it's like, oh my God, I hope they go away? Yes?
That was another comment that was made online. One of the comments that was made online is that they hate environment. People wear a lot of cologne, people smoke.
Amen. I agree with whoever that person is.
And then other providers that smoke, and the patients have to deal with that smell as well.
So the question was about smoking and dealing with other odors. Look, there are some guys that really get a joy out of trying to have gas. Let's try it that way. Does it happen with younger people more than older people? I'm not so sure. You get complacent riding with people, and just because you keep doing it, it becomes acceptable. That's wrong. And who are we? Are we supposed to stop it? But anyway, you get to the point that personal hygiene plays an important role in who your customer is. The relationship between career and volunteer, we talk a little bit, I want to go a little bit more into this, is that we represent each other. People say there's a demarcation line between Baltimore City and Baltimore County. In today's world, that's absolutely so far from the truth, because what happens in Baltimore City affects Baltimore County, and vice versa. Whether it's crime, whether it's traffic, whatever it might be. We have the same problem when we talk about career and volunteer, because if career people do something, does it affect how you might be perceived in the volunteer world? And does it work vice versa, that if you do something and look sloppy, do people look at you differently? The story, I think I told it, I'll tell it again, is I was talking to somebody. A friend of mine was very upset. His wife had esophageal varices and was in a lot of pain, was at the top of the stairs. Two young women showed up in the ambulance to take this patient, and they said to me, I think they were from Chestnut Hill. That didn't sit real well when I heard Chestnut Hill, because I assumed they meant Chestnut Ridge. And I said, wow, that is so far, that's horrible. I said, do you know who they were, what color ambulance? No, I didn't see it, I think it was red. I said, great. So, of course, I went and looked up where they lived, and it was really far away, and I know it was not Chestnut Ridge. I think they must have thought that I was part of Chestnut Ridge or Chestnut Hill or whatever, but the idea was it ended up being a career group, two women, and they thought that this lady was being difficult, and they weren't being nice to her. And that was the perception. But the perception went a lot further, because they thought it was now Chestnut Hill. Obviously, we know we don't have Chestnut Hill. So the point is how we do and how we react to each other. And I know that there are a lot of people here that have wonderful relationships with Station 2 in Pikesville, and I hope that throughout the county there's some wonderful relationships. But one of the things, how do we foster better relationships between career and volunteer groups, because we do affect each other?
Right together.
Does that happen often?
More. A lot more than anything.
So when I was coming through and we were doing firefighting, it seemed that it was always the volunteers did one thing and careers did their own thing. It's a wonderful thing to hear, but shouldn't we be doing that? We get to the handoff. Joe, has it ever happened to you where you've gotten to the call, you've been on a call and somebody else is coming to do the transport, you just happen to be the first one on the scene, you got all the vitals, you got all the information, and the person that's coming off the ambulance brings their stretcher with their bag, slowly walks into the house like they're not there because they don't want to be, and just totally bypass you?
To be perfectly honest, 10 years that's never really happened.
All right, fair enough. Has that ever happened to you, Brian?
Yes, when the engine and then the unit pulls up, the medical unit pulls up, and they remove the diesel and all that, so
That's bad.
that's really bad.
It's really bad. Sean,
Repeat. Can you just repeat?
can you repeat your story a little louder? Here, I'm talking to my...
So we were on the engine as a first responder for a medic. The person didn't want to go to the hospital, and I asked the medic crew to check them out, and they really didn't want to do it. They wanted us to do the refusal, and I asked them to check the patient out because they had the equipment, and it got ugly, but I had a retired captain on the engine with me, and he called whoever he had to call to take care of that.
So Richard ended up investigating for the next 2 weeks, wasted his time. So the whole point is the handoff. All they had to do was say, absolutely no problem, thank you for getting the information. Do we do that? I hope we do. I know I do. Even if it was, I was first on the scene and somebody showed up, or I came in and somebody was telling me what was wrong, I acted like I cared, I listened, and I thanked them. That's what we need to teach. And we need to...
I think post-crews are decent.
I'm sorry?
Post-crews are decent. I think what you find is it's the same crews that have that behavior. And
So-
I'm experienced to the point that I'm like the 14 and say, who in the hell is that paramedic that
because she sucks. Her personal skills are terrible.
And we,
That's her. Even the guy that had worked with her tried to have a conversation and said, I just stopped talking.
there, and that's the problem. That's where it affects every single one of us. You're absolutely right.
And this person is also a volunteer in the career unit. So that made it worse.
So one of the things I think that we have to take away is that I think there's got to be more training between career and volunteer. I think there's got to be metrics and expectations set with how we're going to do things in conjunction with each other to make us a better organization. There's nobody that's perfect. I'm not looking for perfect, but I think that we can do better so that people can understand how hard and how many hours. I get it. I know how many hours you put in. I know how many hours everybody puts in. I know in the middle of the night, I admire career people and volunteers that can sleep in a firehouse. I've tried it numerous times and I have never been able to sleep. I don't know how it's done. What's that? I've tried, and I can think of numerous times I've tried. And
Nice lazy boy chairs, it's very easy to fall asleep.
when I'm not that, yeah, okay. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet.
Most career stations do too.
What's that?
Most career stations do too.
I just admire it. It's like I just want to run calls. I don't want to sleep, and I can't sleep. So, Sean, do you ever sleep in here? No. You should try it.
Too old.
No, he has.
Too old. Oh, I have. That's right. Okay.
So I realize the difficulty, the stresses that go along with it, but every day we have a choice when we wake up how we want to act, and we've got to be at our top of the game because it affects all of us. And it comes down to, am I going the wrong one? So how's customer service changed over the last 10 years? How's it changed? What's the one biggest factor? Social media. Maybe 15 years. So cameras, the advent of the camera. All of a sudden now, you do a lot of rescues, right? Car accidents. How quickly do the cameras come out to people start taking pictures? How quickly? So as soon as you get out, you're on the scene. You are it. You are the star of the show. And what are you going to do? Start running around looking in your medic where your bags are, and open every compartment till you find the one you want. Grab as many bags as you possibly can so it looks like you're doing a really good job. Be loud and start giving out orders. What do you do? Richard, the camera's on you. What are you going to do? You've been doing this for a little bit of time.
What you're trained to do, get out, be professional, provide good customer service.
You're going to get out of the medic slowly. You're going to get out carefully. How about the ones that, do we see it all the time where they get out? One of the things that, let me transgress a little bit. You watch the news. Every shooting, every overdose, whatever's on TV, you always see the police outside, and there's usually fire department also, and they've got the tape. Somber feeling that somebody just died or there's a major issue. And what do you see on TV? You see two firefighters or two cops all of a sudden laughing. What's the perception? They might be nothing to do with the scene, but because they're on TV and it looks like they're laughing, the people then think, wow, that's really horrible. They're sitting there acting like it's a joke. If you haven't noticed that on TV, check it out. So one of the things that I remember Cal Ripken's house had a shooting probably 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And we got called to his house for a shooting. I was a paramedic at the time. Of course, being Cal Ripken's house, Station 50 emptied, and there were about every single person that was there wanted to be at Cal Ripken's house. And I remember blood everywhere on the porch. We got the guy out away from the scene. Of course, the perception was, guy that got shot obviously was involved with drugs. He was jumped over a fence naked and fell on Cal Ripken's porch and bleeding and blood everywhere. So it was drug related. So they thought. It happened to be actually a kidnapping where they used him for his ATM card. Well, Cal Ripken's there, and he won't come. He's in a safe room. Finally, he sees there. I go up to the front door, and he opens the door, and he comes out, and he starts talking to me. And I'm asking him what happened, and explaining the whole story. And all of a sudden, a helicopter starts flying by. What do you think he does? He retreats to his house real quick. He does not want to be seen. What is the perception? He does not want to be seen on TV at a shooting at his house. He says, is that a news helicopter or a police helicopter? I said, it's the police. So he said, oh, it's okay then. And then he came back outside. The point was, the perception was what it's all about. I've had the fortunate opportunity that every time the president of Turkey comes to the United States, we are in his procession as ambulance that follows him around wherever he goes. And they go to the trouble to make sure they never go down a street that has any kind of negative view, whether it could be like a massage parlor or anything like that. They make sure their route never has anything like that because they never want a picture of his vehicle in front of something along those lines. Absolutely incredible, the perception that media tries to go through, or that the dignitaries go through in trying to prevent any kind of negative publicity. So now, again, this comes back to all of a sudden, I'm sure that President Trump was in Baltimore City tonight, lots of protesters down there, lots of people with cameras, and it'll all be posted, right? You get called while you're down there, what happens? Who now is the scene? Who is now Jeff? Who's now the one that's everybody looking at? You. So you've got to be on your game. You've got to look good. You've got to make sure that you look like you care. You've got to make sure that you do the best you possibly can. And you hope that everything goes well. We all watch TV. What is it when we see TV? And this is the one always. You watch TV. They're in a smoky house. Like Chicago Fire. And they have their masks on. And you can see clear as day. And they're standing up. And the smoke is just billowing out of the house. Now, we know that's not real, but to the public, that's what they think. They watch TV and they see paramedics or they see EMTs, whatever they might be doing. How does that shed a light on all of us? You know, most people, do they see it as reality? There are some strange people, but my point to the whole thing is, cameras are out there now, you're on the theater, you're the one in charge, and you're the one being watched, and you represent all of us. And in the last 10 years, just like you brought up your point, if you had a complaint, how was it done? You had to write a letter, you had to be really mad, you had to put a stamp on it, you had to find out who you were sending it to, right? Then it had to, then when you didn't get your response, you were really mad. And then what happened? It took a lot of time to get to the bottom of it, and all we needed, somebody would have said, hey, we screwed up, what can we do to help you? Being honest, I think, is the real true answer. It's kind of hard to argue with someone when you say, I made a mistake.
And if you don't, you may have lost their trust forever.
Right. You know,
In 10 years, you get it back.
look, I know that when I rode, there were a couple of career guys that hated working in this area. And I thought they were pretty nasty. And I had no qualms about trying to have the conversation with them directly. That, you know, when you come into this area, I would hope that you would treat these people with a little bit more respect. You know, you might have grown up on another side of town, but people are people. We're not luggage, and you need to treat them with respect. And I think that is that was one of my biggest pet peeves as a volunteer, with the way some of the, and this is going back 15 years, 18 years, pet peeves of how people reacted. So now that it's changed so much, it's instantaneous. You can be, an accident happens, it's on Facebook in what, 2 seconds?
It's not television, it's this.
Right.
In your very comments, I got a text that you told that.
What's that?
Your comment, and I got a text that you told that. And it said, I didn't know you were that much older than Yaffe.
Tell that person thank you.
I'm back at 5.
So there's a good question.
That's the problem. It's not TV.
It's not TV, it's this.
It's
It's that. How many police officers have lost their jobs because of that?
This hits social media quicker than television's actually broadcast.
Absolutely.
And then, that's
The problem is, once it makes it to social media and it's bad, it then makes it to TV, which makes it even worse. So the question becomes, when is it acceptable to lie? Is it ever acceptable? Is it ever acceptable to embellish a little bit?
with regards to,
So let's assume, we'll go back to my scenario. Baby that you know is dead, has no chance of surviving. Do you want to try to do everything you possibly can to make it look like you cared so the family feels that you did everything you could so that brings closure to them? Absolutely. In my opinion, you do. Is that lying? You know the baby's not going to make it. Some people will tell you, some doctors will come out and tell you, you need to tell the family that the baby has died and there's nothing we can do because we need the resources to keep going and we can't take it out of the field. Is that true, Richard? What do we teach in the academy? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, but again, each individual call is going to be a little bit different, but there are people that would believe that it's better for the bleeding process for the family to have all that stuff done at the hospital. The protocol, obviously, the protocol, and there's a big push for termination or resuscitation, even on pediatric patients, which is the shift to the medical side of things. But there's always that judgment somewhere in between. There's times that we say, no, we really need to go to the hospital, and there's times there's a comfort level to provide, or dealing with that kind of stuff. When you get into the hospital, there's a lot of resources for the family that we don't have out in the field.
So I agree with...
Judgment, and they're really, most of these things, especially if you're talking really complex calls, which, we looked at the totality of that, and, most providers make the right judgment when it comes to that, and they're stressful calls.
So while I disagree with that push to tell them that the baby has died right then and there, I do not agree with that whatsoever. I agree that we need to do as much as we possibly can to make our organizations look good and for the family. Look, if it's my kid, I want you to at least try. Even though it's not going to work, I want you to try. And it's interesting how different people grieve. And because now when something like that happens, you end up with more than one patient. You've got now, who's your customer? Your customer now is everybody watching you. It's your boss, it's your partner, it's your patient, it's everybody. And it's going to be the doctors when you get to the hospital. When you get to the hospital, did you do this? Did you do this? One thing that I was always very impressed with was taking a patient, pediatric, and it happened at Pikesville. I was handed a 18-month-old baby that was on a fire in Reisterstown. Do you remember this call 10 years ago, 15 years ago? 3-year-old lit the crib on fire, and they came out and handed me the baby and said, here, the baby was half burnt. And we flew the baby to Hopkins, and it couldn't have been a nicer experience for me the way Hopkins handled pediatrics. It was very, very impressive. Just like you see on TV, 25 people, and you've all probably experienced it, 25 people in the room, everyone had a job to do, they did the best they possibly could. And as a paramedic, it was very heartwarming to me to see that they were trying as hard as they could. They knew that this baby was not going to make it, but they tried everything they possibly could. And I know the family appreciated it. And I think that's the important part. So now, questions and open discussion. Yes, sir.
So what metrics do you guys follow at so what metrics do customer service?
So anytime we get, and we spend a fortune, anytime we get a positive comment, whether it's written or it's on the bill or it's a phone call, the crew automatically gets a $10 certificate to either McDonald's or whatever. They'll usually get a call from the CFO or CEO of the company, or I will call to thank them for a job well done. We also like to try to recognize as a company internally, which is what everybody else does here, we try to internalize and let everybody know that we've got this incredible letter or this incredible phone call. And you know, we try to say, what is it you know, I am very demanding in my company that what I expect. And we have a lot of really good people, and I'm very proud of most of them. But it's really making sure that they're recognized for a job well done. Because if I don't recognize them, it affects not only me, but everybody else in EMS. The EMS has to be a conglomeration of everybody working together. It's no different. You get to the hospital and the doctor starts yelling at you. What do? Has it ever happened? Yell back, right? Do the Larry approach. What do? Have you ever had a doctor or somebody yell at you? Ask you why you didn't do something? And not only that, they ask you in front of everybody. They don't even pull you aside. Does that ever happen? Richard, you ever have to deal with that? Hopefully not. Good. I'm glad to hear that. We all have to deal with EMTALA rules. Well, we don't. The hospitals do. I loved the idea once I went to Sinai with a patient, and they used to have this purple dot. I can go back far. Does anybody remember the purple dot that used to be on the floor at Sinai? You'd come into the ER and they said, do not move off that purple dot. And you would stand there and you would wait hours till finally one time I picked up the radio and I called dispatch, I did a consult, and I said, we've been at Sinai for an hour now. This patient needs to go somewhere. We're taking the patient to another hospital. What happened? A, I got yelled at by everybody in the world for I wasn't supposed to do that. B, what else happened? Everybody in security and from the hospital came running over and I had a bed in 3 minutes. And what else did happen is the patient thanked me for making sure that I took very good care of him. And that was while I was with Pikesville, by the way.
We had that happen here.
What's that?
We had that happen here.
So, you know, the hospitals...
The other hospital said yes, they'd accept the patient, they took the patient. Everybody...
So that is an...
Oh my God, it's a protocol violation, all that. Will somebody wake up and tell the CEO of Sinai or somebody that he needs a higher one?
That's...
It's a great ER7, but it's not functional because they don't want to pay to staff.
So what does that do? It ties up resources. Ties up resources?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Discourages people.
It's repercussion again.
So do we have conversation with hospitals about our concerns as a group? When was the last time we had a volunteer career bring somebody in from one of the hospitals and say these are some of the issues? Has it ever happened? Richard? Not to put you on the spot. Jeff?
Well, from our perspective, yes, we talk about hospitals frequently, but as an open discussion.
So when was the last time you talked to Neil Meltzer? Well, he'll make sure something happens at university. There's no doubt. But you're on point. We need to have this conversation because you know what? Not only are we their customer, they're our customer. And we need to make sure that we're all working together to have good customer service. The idea is good customer service. That's it for my slides, but I'm here want to ask questions.
I have another nagging question.
Absolutely.
The bad scenario was you show up on an accident and you say, are you okay? Is everyone okay? Is anyone hurt? And you said that was not a great approach. What's better? How should we approach it?
Well, first of all, I don't think I said that.
Oh, so sorry.
First thing you want to do is what? You want to make sure the scene is safe. That's number one. There's nothing worse than like jumping out of the ambulance and opening the door and not looking where you're going on 695 and somebody takes the door off. Does it happen? I don't know if anybody saw the video recently of the two firefighters who were standing outside. They were pulling the U-Haul or they were pulling a trailer, and the trailer took over and knocked the two firefighters over. Anybody see that? They were okay. It was recent. Where it swiped them and knocked them over. It's dangerous out there. I have a CDL and I'll drive a tow truck every once in a while. And I was on 270. If anybody's ever been on 270, it's a very dangerous road. I can't tell you how many times I've jumped over the guardrail. It happens. We need to be careful. So the first thing is you got to be aware, proceed, just like looking for the gorilla. Is that gorilla going to come get you? And you've got to make sure first that you're safe, and then it's obviously going up to the car and doing what you've been trained to do, and it is looking to see who is the worst, in the worst case, who has the worst case that you might think might be the problem. And how do we handle that? That comes down to, you got 3 people, 4 people in the car. You come up to them and what am I going to say? I'm going to say, all right, what's going on? Anybody hurt? Anybody in pain? Is anybody unconscious? You know, the first thing we hope to hear is voices. If we don't hear voices, then it's like, then what? What if we don't hear voices?
That's a problem.
Well, it's a problem. I had a car on Park Heights Avenue, right by my house. Park Heights and right near Walnut, what's it called? Caves. Car was coming around, and the car flipped over, and my wife was with me, and we ran down, and we heard this accident, and when we got there, the car was flipped over, and all we saw were legs under the car with high heels. And it was like, oh my God, this is bad. And I started talking, and this person just happened to be going through, it was a male that was cross-dressed as a female, and was going through this transition, and my wife had no clue. So the supervisor shows up and asks my wife, what's going on? What do you think her answer was? I don't know. It was a great answer. It was like, well, obviously it was like he's thinking, she's in the fire department and no clue what's going on. And gotta love my wife, but she was totally lost because she didn't know if she had a male or she had a female, how old they were, until finally they started explaining. And all she saw were the feet with a deep voice and red shoes. So we're gonna come across those kind of things all the time. It's the perception. My wife felt really bad that she didn't know what to do or what to say, but it was a wonderful learning experience. So again, it's no matter what the situation is, it wasn't that we all started laughing at that moment. It was, we took it all very seriously, and we did the best we could professionally to get these 2 people out of the car and to the hospital. So in a car accident, absolutely be safe, but look for obviously what you can do and go for extra resources. But you want to make sure that you're not standing around laughing and you're not joking and you actually look like you're busy doing something. And I think that's most people do that. It's where we get into the problem is when you have people that egos become bigger than who they think they are, and they want to take charge, and you have 2 or 3 people now that are trying to vie for being in charge, and it goes downhill. And I've seen that on rescues where who's going to grab the saw, who's going to grab the jaws first, who's going to grab the hose going into a fire. Does it happen? Not usually, right? I hope not, but it does happen. So any other questions? We're good? Any other comments?
There's 2 comments online. One is, he's just going back to the recognition that you mentioned earlier. It said that many companies wait until the end of the year to hand out recognition. It's important for people to feel like, they enjoy the place that they come to, that they're being recognized, and that we probably shouldn't be waiting till the end of the year.
Absolutely, that person's absolutely 100%. It should be recognized immediately. And you know what? That's what keeps people going. There isn't anybody in this room that doesn't want to be recognized. And there isn't anybody in EMS that doesn't want to be recognized for what they do. There are a lot of volunteers that do it because they don't do it for the money. They do it because they love doing it and they love helping people. And that all they really look for, there's nothing nicer, you can disagree with me if you want, other than the thank you. The thank you mean a lot?
Absolutely.
So they're absolutely correct. They should not wait until the end of the year to be giving out awards. And how about the person that has done a great job but never got an award? How do they become demoralized? How do you keep their spirits up? So you have 1,000 people in Baltimore County, 800 of them do a great job. One gets an incredible award. What does that do to the other 798 people, 99 people? What do they say? Why am I trying so hard? I'm not getting recognized?
No, they got that for doing their job. Why?
What's that?
They got that for doing their job. Why?
Well, but could they do a better job, and would they do more if they were recognized?
I think on the career side, they do a pretty good job.
I agree.
Instant recognition.
But how about the ones where they only do it?
Common fashion.
I'm sorry?
It's done in a more common fashion.
Agreed. I think that's the way to do it. I absolutely agree. All right, anybody else? Anybody else have any more questions? To thank the people that were nice enough to join in, and thank all of you at least for entertaining me for a little while. I want to thank my actors for their great trip acting again. Usually we do a few more scenarios, but with 4 people I can't really keep doing the same scenarios over and over again.
They're saying that this was a great topic, a lot of discussion, and I know we didn't bring up a lot of it, but they were having a very great discussion online about this topic, so they really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Tell them anytime we can do it again. I would love to see I love doing it. I'm very passionate about it. I absolutely think Baltimore County should make it mandatory that they have a class on customer service. And I think that the career and volunteers should actually be really talking about how do we do more training together so that we know each other and we understand each other. And I think, while it doesn't necessarily have to be costly, I think it promotes an incredible amount of goodwill, and I think we should be doing more recognition in the county with our career and volunteers and getting the word out. And I know we do it by social media, but there are a lot of people that are much older that have money, that can make donations, that can support our organizations, that don't really know how to use social media or don't use Facebook. I have a lot of friends that don't use Facebook or don't use LinkedIn. And they still read the newspaper. They still, not even digitally, they want it in paper so they can touch and feel. What's that? Tangible, right. Well, those are the kind of things. So, I think that I hope that we can inspire some young people to get involved and say, hey, I want to be part of this. I want to help make customer service better. I want to help make it so that we're all engaged. What do I need to do? And I hope that the response from the higher ups, hint, hint, is yes, let's do that.
Well, in recognition, with that kind of stuff that you're talking about, this right here is a prime example of training together. It's a volunteer company being broadcast, a career volunteer, and I recognize, obviously, our crew back here, Dr. Marinholtz, that took the initiative several months, if not years ago now, to put this kind of stuff on. And this is being tuned into by a lot of people across the county and even across the region. I brought it up at NIMS a few times, so even people outside of Baltimore County are looking at a lot of the training topics that are being done here. So there's a lot of positive stuff that right there shows
Absolutely.
when you're committed to something.
No, I think it's great, and thank you for what you do. Thank you for inviting me to join in this, and anytime that I can ever help and want to have that discussion and play scenarios and whatever, I'm happy to do it. So thank you. And everybody online, thank you.
For the record, we used the same age as me.
No, why are you saying that?
I might be a month or two older. We graduated